A group of hardened inmates with shanks in hand walks into the bathroom of a maximum security prison, planning to teach a cocky guy nicknamed Bone a lesson. But Bone, already tipped off about their arrival by his buddy Danny, stays completely calm. He even tells them to leave while their bones are still intact. The thugs just laugh, but they quickly regret it as Bone takes them down, leaving them sprawled across the grimy bathroom floor. He warns that anyone who messes with him for no reason will face the same outcome. Soon after, Bone gets released from prison and rents a room in a small guest house owned by a woman named Tamara. That evening, Isaiah heads to an underground street fight arena run by a shady promoter nicknamed Pinball. Even the big-time local gangster James shows up to watch the brutal battles. James brings in his top fighter, nicknamed Hammer, to face an experienced opponent. Hammer quickly dominates, brutally smashing his rival's head into a bloody pulp. Pinball hands James a hefty prize purse, then gets into his car, where Bone is already waiting. Bone insists that Pinball set him up for one of the next fights. Reluctantly, Pinball agrees, though he's not fond of working with unknown rookies. Meanwhile, James works for an international arms dealer named Franklin, who orders him to eliminate a rival named Daryl. James has no choice but to comply. Later, Pinball introduces Bone to James, who notices Bone giving James's girlfriend Angela a peculiar look. The gangster doesn't like it one bit. After the meeting, Pinball warns Bone to tread carefully around James, as he's both dangerous and unpredictable. The next evening, Bone steps into the ring for his first fight against a hulking opponent. To everyone's surprise, Bone knocks out his rival with just a couple of powerful punches. Seeing Bone's potential, Pinball is thrilled, already envisioning big profits. On the way home, Pinball tells Bone about Angela. James had his eye on her even when she was married and expecting a child. The gangster framed Angela's husband, sending him to prison, where he was eventually killed. After that, James started pursuing Angela, who eventually spiraled into addiction. Nobody knows what happened to Angela's child, but she's completely given up hope. Meanwhile, James visits Daryl during a family dinner. Out of nowhere, he pulls out a sharp blade and murders Daryl, fulfilling Franklin's orders. Back home, James tries to talk to Angela, but she just stares at him with empty eyes. The next day, Teddy shows James a video of Bone's incredible fight, sparking the gangster's interest. That evening, Pinball picks up Bone, and the two head to another neighborhood for the next match. Once again, the fight is over in less than a minute as Bone takes out his opponent with a powerful hook. Bone then declares he's ready to take on two opponents at once, and when they step into the ring, they quickly regret it. Bone doesn't stop there. He yells that he'll fight anyone willing to challenge him. Plenty of contenders step up, but Bone dispatches them all with ease. That night, Bone and Pinball rake in a hefty payout. This becomes a pattern. Day after day, Pinball struggles to keep up with scheduling new fights, while Bone continues his unbeaten streak, becoming one of the top street fighters in the city. Meanwhile, Bone grows closer to Tamara, who helps treat his injuries after especially tough matches. Tamara shares that she has taken in 3 foster kids and, despite the challenges, hopes to raise them to be good people. Her relative Roberto helps out, giving her confidence they can handle it together. One of the foster kids, a lively boy named Jared, catches Bone's attention. Bone even teaches him how to stand up for himself in a street fight. When James learns that one of his associates is leaking information to the cops, he chases her down and brutally runs her over with his car. Then he orders Teddy to clean up the mess. Roberto inadvertently witnesses the murder, which puts him in danger. James decides to test Bone's skills and pits him against his best fighter, Hammer, who is juiced up on powerful steroids. The fight lasts a while, but Bone not only dodges Hammer's deadly blows, but also manages to land some devastating hits of his own. Eventually, Bone overpowers Hammer, knocking him out. Impressed, James invites Pinball and Bone to dinner at his mansion. The next evening, they arrive at the lavish estate, where Bone continues to show interest in Angela, despite Pinball's warnings to steer clear. James takes Bone aside for a private chat, showing off his collection of weapons and boasting about his skills with blades. He reveals that he works for Franklin, a powerful arms dealer and organizer of underground fights. James mentions Franklin's undefeated champion, Pretty Boy Price, who has killed 4 opponents in the ring without ever losing. James proposes a fight between Price and Bone, a match worth $5 million. If Bone wins, they'll both walk away rich. Bone promises to think about it. To seal the deal, James orders Angela to convince Bone to agree to the fight. She leads Bone to a cozy room, where Bone unexpectedly pulls out a photo of Danny, accusing Angela of being the reason for his death. In tears, Angela denies it, revealing that Danny was her husband. She explains that James framed him and sent him to prison, where he was killed by thugs hired by the gangster. Bone then tells Angela he knows where her son is and promises to reunite them. They rejoin James, pretending to have hit it off. Bone asks James to let him borrow Angela for a short while, and James agrees, believing he has Bone under control. Instead, Bone takes Angela to a rehab center to help her overcome her addiction, promising she'll soon see her son. Meanwhile, James goes to Franklin, lays $5 million on the table, and pitches the epic fight between Price and Bone. Franklin, confident in his champion, agrees. When Bone returns to the guest house, he finds Tamara in tears. She reveals that James's thugs killed Roberto because he witnessed the murder of the informant. Bone comforts her, but their grief is interrupted by James, who barges in. The gangster announces that the fight with Price is happening in a few hours and orders Bone to get ready. Bone refuses, saying he never agreed to the fight. Furious, James pulls a gun, threatening to kill Tamara and her foster kids if Bone doesn't comply. Left with no choice, Bone agrees. James sends Hammer to rough up Pinball as a warning. However, Bone arrives armed, taking out Hammer and several of James's men. Teddy, along with a few more thugs, heads to the rehab center to retrieve Angela and bring her back to James. But Bone and Pinball are waiting for them. Together, they take down the gangsters. Bone then calls James, taunting him by saying he's wiped out his entire crew. James, trying to stay composed, tells Bone he'll be waiting at Franklin's mansion for the big fight. Soon after, Bone arrives at the arms dealer's estate and confronts James, accusing him of Danny's and Roberto's murders. James, surprised to learn that Danny was Bone's friend, arrogantly admits to both killings, unaware that Bone has recorded the confession and sent it to the police via Pinball. Despite the tension, the fight between Bone and Price begins. Price, confident and cocky, doesn't even bother taking off his jacket. The two fighters trade powerful blows, seemingly matched in strength. However, it becomes clear that Bone is the superior fighter, and he's on the verge of victory. Suddenly, to everyone's shock, Bone deliberately surrenders. James is furious, realizing Bone threw the fight intentionally to make him lose the $5 million he had wagered. Enraged, James pulls out a sword, ready to kill Bone. Franklin, seeing this as dishonorable, orders his men to give Bone a weapon. It turns out Bone is highly skilled with a blade. In a swift duel, Bone overpowers James, severing his hand. Sirens wail as the police, tipped off by Pinball, storm the mansion to arrest James. Bone slips away just as the chaos unfolds. Sometime later, Angela completes her rehab and heads to Tamara's guest house, where her son Jared has been staying. Tamara had been caring for him all along. Reunited with her child, Angela is overcome with joy. Bone had stayed at the guest house to protect Jared until this moment. Knowing his mission is complete, Bone says his goodbyes to Tamara, Angela, and Jared. He leaves to continue his journey. Meanwhile, James ends up in prison, where Franklin orchestrates his comeuppance by sending a group of thugs to teach him a painful lesson. So, what did you think of Blood and Bone? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.